left off last week, we learned that every one of Robert's 11 children had chores to do around the house. The older children took on the more strenuous chores, and the younger children were in charge of gathering eggs and loading the hay wagon. In this episode, we'll find out exactly how the family pitched in together to butcher the hog for food for the winter.
Then there were the chores that everybody pitched in to do when the time came. They all helped plant oats in the spring, plant the corn in May, harvest the barley in June, harvest wheat in July, harvest oats in August, and when the fruit came in, it was time to pick peaches, cherries, apples, and pears. Everyone helped sow barley and wheat in the fall. Then they stripped tobacco in the winter. Conversation around the dinner table was always lively, like the Sunday of the first week in December when they all knew what had to be done that week. Every year their father started with, "Well, I guess you all know that next week we will be butchering the hogs. That means you need a good night's rest tonight and be ready to get up at the crack of dawn. It'll be a long day tomorrow and each day for the rest of the week." "What other families will be helping us this year?" asked Susanna. "Well, for sure, Samuel's family will be here. Then Grandma Finney's family and the Barnetts always show up. I think the Robinsons want to be in on it this year," said Robert. Nancy was quick to react to the last part. "Oh, good. I hope Jimmy Robinson comes, too. He'll be a big help." Nancy and Jimmy would be married 2 years later in 1812. "That boy's not that great, sis. What's this all about? Are you sweet on him or something?" asked Tom. "Well, he is rather handsome and he's strong, too. That's all I mean," Nancy replied. Their father responded, "Don't get all excited expecting that you and Jimmy will get to spend any time together. You and Susanna need to be in the kitchen helping your mother feed the hands that show up on Monday. I expect a big crowd here. Then on the next day, all the men will go to the next farm until we get all 5 farms covered. During that time, you girls will stay here. The cows still need to be tended to, and you will be busy taking care of things around the farm." Young Sam was quick to look for an excuse to be home with the girls. "So when all those men go off to the next farm, can I stay here? I can be the man around the farm." Robert was abrupt. "No, Sam, you cannot stay here. You're big enough to help drop the guts and dump them. We will need you to take care of that part of the job at each farm. You're going with us all week." "Oh, I wish I didn't have to do that part of the job. Can't I just help pull the hair off the hog after he's scalded or something like that?" Sam said. "All right, you can help dehair the hog, and then you will help drop the guts and dump them. There'll be plenty of work for you to do," his father said. "That's a lot for a little kid like me to do," grumbled Sam. "That's enough, Sam," said Robert. "Now, are there any more questions before we get ready for this?" When their father answered with a brusque response like he gave Sam, the children knew that he was losing patience with them. There were not any more questions. Butchering the hogs always happened during the first week in December. 4 or 5 neighboring families would work together all week, making sure that each family had enough pork to sustain them for the long winter ahead. This year the families were Robert Stewart, Samuel Stewart Jr., the Finneys, the Barnetts, and the Robinsons. It was a tough and tiring week, but everybody looked forward to it each year. Months before butchering day, wood had been cut, split, and dried to assure a hot fire to heat the water used to scald the hog. It was understood that the neighbors would arrive at daylight, and, as usual, they were all there on time. The fires were already under the water pots, and Robert had placed a pile of logs as a barrier to keep the wind from blowing out the fire. Inclement weather never canceled butchering, even though the first week in December often brought cold and wet days. It was the responsibility of each owner to shoot his own hog. Robert took aim at his hog, pulled the trigger, and the hog dropped with the crack of the gun. After the hog was shot, the sticker slit the hog's throat to bleed him. The sticker's job was crucial because of the importance of draining as much of the blood from the carcass as soon as possible. He used a pointed knife, sharpened on both sides, and twisted it slightly in the stick hole to assure a wide opening. Some of the men loaded the bled hog on a wooden skid and dragged the carcass over to a scalding trough, an open wooden container filled with scalding hot water. They immersed the hog in the water, where William and David, sons of Samuel Stewart Jr., two of the strongest men, rotated him back and forth while several others, including young Sam, gathered round the hog and scraped the bristles. When completely clean, a butcher cut a slit through the tendons on the rear legs where he inserted a wooden rod called a gambrel stick. He attached a rope to the gambrel, and the hog was hoisted to a height where the head was about a foot off the ground. It took 3 men to pull the 200-pound hog up in the air like that. They tied the rope off, and the butchers were ready to begin. Some jobs require more skill than others when butchering a hog. The highest skill is opening the belly cavity without cutting into the stomach or intestines. The head butcher performed this task. Then others dropped the stomach and entrails into a wheeled cart, placed under the carcass just in time by young Sam. Sam, not yet a teenager, struggled to get the loaded cart to move, but was losing the battle. It was just too much for him. David, his 18-year-old second cousin, came up and said, "What's wrong there, kid? That gut buggy too heavy for you?" "I think so," Sam had to admit. David said, "Well now, I guess that's what families are for. Let me give you a hand." And together they trudged down the path to the dumping pit. Sam was relieved that someone finally paid attention to him and thanked David for his help. David said, "Stay here for a while. I want to take a smoke." "You don't smoke, do you?" That comment came with a grin, because David knew well that the New Side Presbyterianism in Sam's house stood foursquare against such evils as tobacco, liquor, dancing, and gambling. "No," Sam replied, but he was glad to have an excuse to take a break. "Thanks for helping me out. I really don't like to haul those guts." "So," said David, "it sounds like you have a tough life on the farm. Don't you want to be a farmer when you grow up?" Sam thought about that for a while and said, "I don't know. Maybe not." "I know about me," David said. "I definitely don't plan to farm all my life. I want to get out west and find something exciting to do. There's lots of things to do out there that aren't farming." "Like what?" asked Sam. David said, "Like my brother Robert. He lives up in Huntington. He's the postmaster up there and has some kind of iron business with my other brother William. Maybe I can get on with them and become a blacksmith or something. Anything but farming." Sam liked to think he could do something else too. He made up his mind right then and there that as soon as he was grown up, he was going to get off that farm and go west. But for the rest of the week, he knew he was still a farmer's son, and he would be working with the hog butchering men until the last hog was disposed of and in the storage shed. While David and Sam were down in the dump, the rest of the crew was busy. The butcher severed the head and set it aside for trimming. At this point, the hog became pork, never to be referred to as a hog again. Next, the crew removed all the internal organs and set them aside in a clean pan, making sure that nothing could contaminate them. The head butcher then cut down the center of the spinal column, using a large cleaver and a hammer to split the vertebrae. They laid out the two halves of the hog carcass on wooden tables. Butchers cut off hams and shoulders, placed them on side tables, and then separated the loins, bellies, and fat backs. All the workers took care to assure that none of the meat made contact with the ground. Meat cutters at each of the small tables trimmed the fat and placed it in a pot to be cooked and made into lard. They trimmed the head to obtain head meat. They skinned the bellies, destined to be salted down and become bacon. They salted down the fat backs too, so they would become salt pork. Everything was accounted for. Somebody saved the organs, the heart, liver, and kidneys, so that they could be worked into specialty meat dishes. Others gathered up all the small meat scraps that were trimmed off and saved them to be used in making pork sausage. Nothing was wasted. The old adage, "we save everything except the squeal," was very true in the Scotch community in Hanover Township. It was a long day the day they butchered the hog. While the men were doing the butchering, the women were in the kitchen making lunch and supper to feed the large crew. All those women in one kitchen found time while working to gossip over the ladies who were not there because they were assumed pregnant or for whatever other reason. At the end of the day, there were pots boiling to cook some of the meat items. People were rubbing salt onto the bellies and fatbacks to preserve them through to the next butchering season. They hung the fresh meat in outdoor storage sheds where the temperature would remain cool all winter, with natural refrigeration enough to keep the meat from spoiling until it warmed up again in the spring. As the sun fell, some were still grinding fat and meat scraps, cornmeal, salt, and pepper in preparing to make sausage.
I hope you've been enjoying this episode of Lands Where My Fathers Died. Next week, we'll find out that Sarah Stewart died at the very young age of 44. It was almost more than Robert could bear. With the support of his children and fellow churchgoers, he continued to be a supportive father and grandfather. Join us next week for another exciting episode from Lands Where My Fathers Died by Jack Stewart.